He's doing well, though, when it comes to COVID and when it comes to health care, not doing so well when it comes to immigration. Look at this Fox News poll. 58% approve of how he's handling COVID. 48% approve of how he's handling health care. So he has more approval in those areas than disapproval. But where he is getting disapproval when it comes to guns, 49% disapprove, 36% approve. When it comes to border security, 51% don't approve. 35% do. When it comes to immigration, 52% don't, and 34% do.
All right, so here's the thing with President Biden. The most fortuitous time to ever take over control of a country is one that's been shut down for a year, for the first time in over 100 years, and was going to get its gears in, was going to get on track anyway. That allows him to see a growing economy, despite what he's doing with the threatening to double capital gains, despite the fact that he's going to raise the rates of the most productive people in our country, despite the fact that he's going to make us uncompetitive again with a corporate tax rate hike that is going to allow businesses or force businesses to leave our shores once again. So as the jobs come back and people just go back, even though they're slowed down because of his policies, it's going to say, look, it's working. It's working because we're finally allowed to go back to work because the pandemic is beginning to dissipate in our borders. So how much... The one thing that he can't get away from is his terrible job at the border. His rush to undo President Trump's policies have caused a catastrophe. And what he's tried to do is something fascinating. It's not in any leadership book that's ever sold a copy. Ignore your biggest problem. But the American people are not buying it. Take a look at this poll when it comes to who is responsible for the chaos at the border that's costing hitting record marks into 20-year marks in terms of the number of unaccompanied minors and families. Is he completely responsible? 38%, mostly 18%, a little 21%. Not at all, 15%.
Who said that?
I have no idea.
15%.
And this should look bad on Kamala Harris because she was given the portfolio to fix it, and she has shown no interest in going to the border and might do a Zoom call later this week. And in June, she promises to visit at least one country. I've never seen anything like it.
So when you look at the completely due to Biden being elected, along with mostly, so a majority of Americans say that what is happening on our southern border is because of Joe Biden, either completely or mostly. And just about an hour ago, we had Daniel Garza on. He's the president of Libra Initiative, a Hispanic group based down in Texas. And he had this observation about the message that the open border is sending to the world.
Like all other Americans, we're frustrated as to what's going on. You know, during the campaign, candidate Biden talked about the border issue like he had all the answers, and he gets into office, and it turns out his strategy was not being Trump. That's not a good strategy. What happened is that you know, he made all these changes to Trump's policies all at one time. That sent a loud message across the Northern Triangle. The border is open. And now, 100 days in, the sense is that he's lost total control. He's overwhelmed by what is happening at the border.
You know, and what is curious is the number one thing that Joe Biden said he would do if elected president was he would, well, he said that, but he said, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do better than Donald Trump when it comes to coronavirus. But when you look at the number of people who are coming into the country and being let into the United States interior, so many of them, according to the numbers, have a very high infection rate. So it's like you have two different messages there. One is we're trying to stop it, but at the same time, we're paying a blind eye to what is going on our southern border. Is that by design?
Maybe so. If we ignore it, we don't address it as a crisis, they'll continue to come in. We'll wait until June to go down there and address it. That gives them an extra month and a half before they have to do anything about it or really, you know, look at the root causes and find out what the problems are down there. He said he was going to unify our country when he ran. And he's done everything
How's that working
but
so far?
that, right? With packing the court, talking about D.C. becoming a state, with changing, you know, there are complaints about election laws, and it's just one thing after another. What's happening with immigration, gas prices going up, the Keystone Pipeline being canceled, people out of work, higher taxes. We're not unified as a country, and then, you know, you see what's happening in all of these cities with police and with just divided communities. So NBC had a poll. How united would you say our country is? Look at that. 82% said totally divided. How sad is that?
Yeah, we agree that we're divided. And here's part of it. The president said he's going to come into office and no person can fix everything in one day. But when he goes out and says, I have an idea, let's get a commission to pack the court, let's get an answer in 180 days. And when there's a mission to do that ahead of it, he doesn't stop it. And then when it talks about D.C. becoming a state, well, I have an idea. I've been there since 1973, but I really believe it should be a state. I wonder if it has anything to do with the 2 additional senators. And when it comes to energy, I never wanted to ban fracking, but I'm going to stop you from drilling on federal land, and I'm going to do the best I can to dismantle fossil fuels, and just made a pledge to the world wearing a mask that he is going to put us off fossil fuels and reduce carbon, I guess, to 0 by about 2030, which will have 0 effect on the world, by the way, but I don't want to get sidetracked. Here's Senator Rand Paul on the disruption which is Joe Biden.
Just a couple of months ago, we were hearing from President Biden, the newly inaugurated President Biden, that he was going to unify the country and that we were going to work together and have bipartisanship. I'm still waiting, Mr. President. I haven't seen any of that. Instead of working together on anything to do with COVID or vaccines, they put together a massive $2 trillion bill where less than 10% of it had anything to do with vaccines. Now they're doing the same thing on infrastructure. There are those of us who are saying we could be for a bipartisan infrastructure bill if it had to do with real infrastructure like roads and bridges and if it was paid for. But so far I don't see any of that coming from Biden, and I predict they're going to ram through something with only Democrat votes and no Republican participation again to a tune of a couple $1 trillion.
The only thing that could stop it would be Joe Manchin, who said, I think it's got to be targeted. He welcomed the Republican policy on infrastructure, which I think was about $550 billion. They're at $1.4 trillion, but the 1.4 has human infrastructure where they're going to have a climate police and they're going to have $400 billion for elder care. That should be in a health care bill, and the climate police should be something that Sweden does.
Well, there are different parts of that care infrastructure that people like. They like the idea of getting healthcare workers to help them with their situations. What he's got going for him right now...
That's not infrastructure.
No, of course it's not. But it's what we were talking about before. It's like, you know, we're going to pay this $2 trillion, buy this $2 trillion thing, but I'm going to get a check. So what's in it for me? Ultimately, right now, Joe Biden has got pretty doggone high approval ratings. His economy is working. His advisors feel that at this point in time, he has the opening to raise taxes. And so they boiled the Biden formula down to this: talk like a rosy bipartisan, but act like a ruthless partisan. And that is what he's doing. He's saying one thing in public, but the other thing
and Americans
behind the back
are smart.
to try to get stuff done.
They see that. They see that. They talk about immigration. They're not even down there working on immigration.
I know.
They're talking about coronavirus, yet all these immigrants are coming in and they're staying in these facilities and they're sleeping shoulder to shoulder. And coronavirus, people are getting coronavirus in these facilities. So they say one thing, but then they do something else when it comes to immigration.